Hey, Crown Corner family. Welcome back to your favorite spot for the most intriguing and jaw-dropping stories around. Today, we've got a lineup of tales that are sure to have you on the edge of your seats. From unbelievable to petty revenges, these stories showcase the wild and unpredictable nature of life. So grab your snacks, settle in, and let's dive right into these incredible narratives. Cast is 1, my crappy landlord. 2, our house manager, who he's the landlord's kid. 3, me, some dude that lives in a closet. 4, the house manager's girlfriend. 5, my lovely girlfriend. And finally, 6, cop, a buddy of mine that I've worked with for years. So here goes. I currently live in a college town in Utah, and I rent a room from a guy I met for about $250 a month. There are 5 other dudes in this house, and all of them break the house rules. The biggest of which is that there are not to be any overnight guests, especially women. Now I work as security and first response for law enforcement. This means I work all over the place, but at the time of this occurrence, I was a bouncer at a bar. So I have my lovely girlfriend over from time to watch movies and such. Landlord says this is fine so long as she doesn't stay over. One night I go out to my kitchen to grab some popcorn and girlfriend comes from the room of one of my other roommates, obviously having been sleeping with him behind the house manager's back. I didn't say anything as it wasn't my place, but she came up and started hitting on me. At this time, the house manager comes from his room and gets all huffy at me for trying to steal his girlfriend and being a bad roommate. I told him I didn't want his girlfriend, nor was I ever going to be interested. I finished my movie with my lovely girlfriend, and she went home while I went to work at the bar. I got a phone call about halfway through my shift from landlord. I was doing my mobile rounds to make sure nothing was happening out of the line of sight of the other bouncers, so I was able to answer the phone. My landlord is blowing a fuse. He proceeds to accuse me of having my lovely girlfriend live with me at the house when it was explicitly said that was against the rules. I told him otherwise, and he said he was going to check my belongings for evidence. I responded by telling him about the security camera in my room, and that if he makes a move to enter my room without my consent, that he would be sent to jail, or I'd just shoot him if I caught him red-handed. He calmed down after that. He follows up by saying no women are permitted in my house, and I will call the police to have any and all women trespass. If I feel there are any girls in that house, I responded with a polite, I understand. He goes, good. He literally extended the word with emphasis on every other ooh. About a week later, I heard the house manager and girlfriend being intimate through my wall. I text the landlord and say something, and he responds with the works hard in school and deserves to unwind. It's fine, I then say, oh. So I can have my lovely girlfriend over for a bit to watch a movie? He responds in all caps, absolutely not. No women are to be in that house. I'll be sending a new lease over in the morning for everyone to sign. It will reflect this rule. At this point, I began putting my plan of Mike into action. The next day he came over and we all signed the lease, including house manager. I waited, and when house manager's girlfriend arrived that night, I called an old friend that I used to work as a bodyguard with. He's a cop now, so I wanted to see what could be done. I told him the situation and he simply replied, I'll take care of it. What's the address? Not 5 minutes later, he texts me from outside asking me to let him in. I open the door and he asks what room she's in. I show him to the door and he gives me a little wink. He kicks in the door to my roommate's room, puts the girl in cuffs, starts escorting her outside. My roommate, being a bit entitled, decides that since he took a year of karate when he was in grade school, he can take a cop down with a closet rod. But when he approached my friend, he got tased. The next day, the landlord comes over and starts yelling at all of us, and he says something like this, how dare any of you even consider calling the police on my son? He's a good kid. We all kind of looked at each other, and I responded with, we didn't call the police on him. We called the police on the girl that was in his room, as per house rules that you made us agree to and sign. He looked like he was about to blow a fuse. He leaves without saying a word, and later that day, his wife shows up to inspect the house. So, of course, I called my buddy up again. And since she was outside a domicile that is known to have a rule of no women on the property, and since her name wasn't on the deed to the property, she got arrested too. I'm now at the end of my lease. My landlord no longer enforces that stupid rule, and both his wife and future daughter-in-law have a record of trespassing on the same property, which was his to begin with. I thought you guys might appreciate this story. I have a load more about my roommates and stuff if you want to hear some just from me. When I started working as a lawyer at a large law firm, staff members would often come to me with their legal problems. One day, a quiet young woman from the accounting department came into my office confused about a legal settlement she had gotten. The woman had been involved in a very minor car accident. She got talked into signing up with a lawyer whom she never even got to meet. Sometime after that, she received a call to come down to the lawyer's office to sign some papers that she didn't understand, was given a check for about $2,000 by some flunky, and then sent on her way. I borrowed all of her paperwork and figured out what had happened. My coworker was a victim of a capper scheme. which is when non-lawyers sign up clients for lawyers in return for a financial kickback. This is generally considered to be unethical and possibly illegal because many of these cases are near worthless. The lawyers quickly settle them for cheap and pocket 33% to 40% as their fee. When I checked the state bar records, I realized that the lawyer had signed the retainer agreement with my coworker after he had taken the bar exam, but before he had officially become a lawyer. In other words, for several months, he had been illegally practicing law without a license. I was upset. I sent him a demand letter stating that I knew what he did. I bluffed him and said that if he had been a real lawyer the entire time, he would have handled the case properly and would have gotten a much higher settlement. I told him that I wanted $5,000 to compensate my coworker. It would have been illegal for me to threaten to report him to the state bar or to the police if he did not pay, but that was the subtext. A few days later, I received a telephone call. Lawyer, in a pleading voice, "What do you want?" "I don't have any malpractice insurance." Me, angrily, "I don't want any insurance money? I would be just as happy to put you out of business." The next day, I received my demanded settlement check from the lawyer. I walked the check over to the accounting department and gave it to my coworker. The unexpected extra money came in very handy for her upcoming wedding, to which I was later invited and happily attended. It would have been illegal for the lawyer to demand that I not report him to the state bar or police in return for the check. Nonetheless, I decided not to report him. I figured that he deserved a second chance and did not want to ruin his life at the start of his legal career. So, this happened when I was around 13. 14, one thing that plays a significant role in this story is the fact that I'm openly a furry. Now I hope this is something that you will accept me being. Also, I got a few comments asking what a furry is. It's a person who enjoys human-like animals and may have one as their alter ego, acting as one online or in real life. I don't do that. The story. So I was your average student, just doing whatever before finding the furry fandom and joining it. I was very open about it, and many people didn't really care since I wasn't bothering anyone with it, or so I thought. Enter Entitled Kid. The entitled kid was from a very racist family, and surprise, surprise. Surprise, I am from Russia. Now I do get why some Finnish people dislike Russia, since we blamed Winter War on them and such. But this guy had so much hatred towards me, it actually surprised me more than anything else. And coming out as a furry made him hate me even more. One day I was just hanging around after school, just doing whatever, when suddenly a wild, the entitled kid appears, followed by the entitled sidekick. Now, I generally wasn't that scared of these guys, since they are both around 5'6", and I'm surprisingly tall at 6'2". One thing to note, these guys are around 15, relevant later in the story. So the entitled kid comes around and just does what he likes to do most of the time. Call me racial slurs and make fun of me in other ways. I just kind of ignore them for a while before the entitled kid pulls something out of his backpack. A gun. Nope. A knife? No. A friggin' leash. I kind of look at him confused, with him grinning at me. This is a rough translation of the following conversation. Keep in mind this happened around 3 years ago. The entitled kid. What are you waiting for? Put it on me. What? The entitled sidekick. Everybody knows you like to act like a dog. Me. No. What are you on about? The entitled kid. You are a disgusting degenerate who likes to hug passionately with animals. Me. No, I just like animals. The entitled kid. Shut up. It's a fact. With that, he tackles. Well, more like jumps on top of me, leading to me falling to the ground and hitting my head on concrete. The entitled sidekick taking the opportunity and slipping the collar and leash around my neck while I'm trying to catch my breath. The entitled kid grabs the leash and starts pulling on it, practically choking me and leaving me gasping for air. The second I thought I was going to die, he lets go. Both the entitled kid and the entitled sidekick let out the most disgusting laughter. The entitled kid drops the leash and pulls out a smallish knife. Now I could tell you how with my last breath I fought them off, but reality is quite disappointing. He swung the knife at me. I put my arm to block it and he cut my forearm, blood gushing everywhere. I kicked him and he fell on his side, and I kicked him again for good measure. The entitled sidekick just kind of stood there before helping the entitled kid up. Then both just kicked me a few times before running off. I called myself an ambulance and got taken to the hospital where I got treated with painkillers. And I got 5 stitches and had to stay there for a few days since I had a problem breathing. And now I have a slight stutter since they damaged some nerve in my throat with the leash. My parents were furious. Now you may ask, where's the entitled mother? Well, she's coming to play now. After around 2 weeks, my family settled down. I had to go to speech therapy. But I don't really mind that. We thought that this ordeal was over. You probably guessed this by now. It wasn't. After about 3 weeks of the ordeal happening, we receive a letter to court with the entitled kid's family suing us. Luckily, one of our family friends is a lawyer. not a perfect one, but good at his job. We immediately called him, and I told him what had happened. He immediately told us that he got this and told us to just wait. The court day arrived. Since I'm the only person in my family capable of speaking Finnish, my family couldn't help me, so I had to retell everything by myself. I walk into the courtroom, followed by the family friend. We sit down, and suddenly a goblin emerges from the doors in the dirtiest clothes imaginable, followed by grinning the entitled kid. That's the Karen. The sitting starts, and the entitled kid's family starts going first. They took over 20 minutes to retell the story in dramatic detail. I'm going to quickly sum it up. I was bullying the entitled kid for his whole life. That day after school, I attacked him and pushed him to the ground, breaking his phone. Then I tried to assault the entitled sidekick, but the entitled kid pushed me away, leading to me falling onto the ground and me taking out a knife and slicing my own arm to make the entitled kid look like a bad kid. Also, she tried to victimize the entitled kid and her family as much as possible. She demanded that my family had to replace the entitled kid's phone and had to pay $10,000 for therapy, damages, and mental problems caused by the ordeal. When it came my turn to tell what had happened, I told everything as it was, with the claimant denying everything. After that, the judge asked us to present our evidence, with the claimant presenting the broken phone and a letter from a bystander. Then it was the family friend's turn to present evidence. He asked to question Karen about the ordeal. Keep in mind, this is all translated by my poor translation skill. The family friend. Is it true that assaulted the entitled kid on X of May? Karen. That is true. The family friend. Is there any evidence besides a broken phone and a letter from a bystander not present in the courtroom? Karen. No. The family friend. Will you confirm that what you told us is true? Karen. I confirm that I'm 100% certain that this is how it happened. She actually said 100%. The family friend turns to the judge. The family friend. May I present a security camera footage as a piece of evidence? The family friend had contacted the school, asking if any workers saw anything. The school sent him the security recording my school had security cameras installed pointing to the yard where that happened. As he said that Karen turned to white. Gonna update this in a bit. Tired of writing. Let's continue. So after seeing the tape, Judge turns towards the entitled kid and Karen. Judge, how do you plead? Karen, not guilty. Clearly, these insert racial slur. Forge the evidence to ruin my baby's reputation. Karen continues ranting Ruskies and immigrants for some reason. The judge looks so done. I swear I saw the look of disbelief in his eyes. Judge stops Karen's rant and says, by the way, I see you acting. It is clear who is in the right in this situation. Basically, I'm so done with you and your nonsense. He charges Karen with forging evidence and lying to a judge, and the entitled kid with assault and attempted murder since I almost lost my life. Now, remember me saying he was 15? That's the age you can go to jail in Finland. I think you know what happened to him. Jail time for 3 years. Judge had to call in security to escort Karen out. I was too distracted to hear her punishment. So here I am, a 16-year-old furry who almost died for being myself. Quick pause, folks. If you're loving these stories, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to K-Korner, and drop a comment below. Your support means the world to us and helps keep this channel thriving. Plus, it's a great way to join our community and share your thoughts on these wild tales. All right, let's jump back into the action. This story involves legal issues, so names and identifying details were changed. And now, for the fun part, this story is about 5 years old, and some of it, as you will read in the end, is still rolling, probably for a long time. It starts with Mrs. Principal, as principal, because that's what she is. Mrs. Principal started as a special needs kids caretaker, studied through the years of work, and graduated a doctorate in special education. After 20 years of experience in this, she was asked by the council of a medium-sized city to open and run a new special needs school in the city. She accepted the offer, and after 4 years, she had a school with 150 kids in it. For a special education school, that is a huge number. Such schools need way more people than regular schools, not just teachers, but also other caretakers. And the job isn't always clean and easy. So naturally, Mrs. Principal is always looking to hire. Then comes our Karen. Karen just finished her college and got a degree in education consulting at the top of her class. Her professor was on Mrs. Principal's school board, and she recommended her with very warm words. Karen was basically hired before she even sent her resume. Karen is married to Kevin, of course, who finished his law studies top 5 in his class and now doing his internship in a big law firm, awaiting his license to practice law. Basically, their future is laid bright and clear. All they have to do is not screw up on the path to a nice, rich life. Mrs. Principal accepted Karen to work in the school and announced she will start to work on August 20th, about a week before the school year starts, as the staff needs to organize the school for the opening of the school year. Karen protests that She is a consultant, not another lowlife that comes to mop the floor. Mrs. Principal is pissed by this attitude. But Karen is top of her class and supposedly the best in the field. So she just smiles and says staff starts to work on August 20. You are staff too, so be here on that date. Karen isn't happy, but well, that's life. That pre-opening week the staff will never forget. While teachers and nurses and other members all worked together hard to get the school up to shape, including painting the walls, setting equipment, and other choirs you don't learn in college, Karen fixed her own room, sat in it all day, and played with her phone. Needless to say, she wasn't very popular among school staff. But time went on. School opened on time, and things started to get into their regular routine. Karen was causing more and more issues. She refused to fill in regular reports about her activities, was not available to meetings with staff and parents, and all in all, was a total entitled Karen. Mrs. Principal tried to talk to her again and again, to no avail. Eventually, Mrs. Principal asked the professor, the one who gave Karen her degree, the one who was on the school's board, to sit with Karen daily and couch her how to actually work and function in a real school environment, as apparently she didn't learn that in college, but even that didn't help. Karen was hated by all the school staff, and her work was done poorly and getting worse every week. Mrs. Principal had a meeting every week with Karen and the professor to discuss her performance and how to do better. Meanwhile, important reports and other documents were not filled, and the care of the children was getting worse every day, until eventually a parent filed a complaint about the poor treatment his child got, and the board became aware of the issues. A meeting was set with the board, Mrs. Principal and Karen. The professor promised Karen that if she will set order to her paperwork and act respectfully, it will be all right. Karen knew she was on the hook now, but just couldn't stop being a Karen. So the day of the meeting comes, and Karen is a no-show, no call. She just didn't come that day, and the day after, and the week after. Without Karen, the board can only hear what Mrs. Principal has to say, but they already know it. So the meeting is delayed to a time when Karen will show up. Needless to say, this doesn't help her case at all. Anyway, Mrs. Principal and the professor tried to get Karen on the phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Eventually, Mrs. Principal has no choice. Karen is a no-show, no call for over a week. She has to have a really good explanation to not get fired now. She calls Karen and leaves a message in her voicemail that she hadn't heard from her in over a week. She is very worried and please be in contact ASAP as finance wants to cut her pay. Finally, Karen called in. She has been sick the whole time. She will return to work in 2 days. Good, Mrs. Principal marked the date and set a meeting with the professor and Karen first thing in the morning. If Karen is sick and has a doctor's note, she will not be fired, but she'll get some strong talk about the no-call issue. The day comes, Mrs. Principal and the professor sit in her office waiting to Karen to come. She didn't come. Mrs. Principal tried to call her and get the voicemail. Again? She is pissed. The professor is pissed. Karen has set a new record in pissing and wasting everybody's time. Karen shows up 2 hours late, and Mrs. Principal calls her to a meeting immediately before anything else. She calls the professor to come. The professor canceled other plans she had to come in, and the meeting finally starts 3 hours late. Thankfully, Karen had a doctor's note. She is okay on that, but she is going to get the strong words talking now. About 10 minutes into the meeting, Karen burst into tears. The meeting is stopped to cool things down, but not over yet. After a few minutes, everybody comes back into the room, and Karen opens. I'm still not okay. I still feel sick. I want to go home now. Mrs. Principal is silent, and the professor comments as a board member, I must say. As long as you are sick, your job is safe, but it is your first year. You have not saved anything in sick days or vacation days. You will not be paid for this. Karen just said we will see about that, collected her things and left. Karen is sick for another 2 weeks, and her position is vacant. Mrs. Principal does what she can to fill the void, as do others. But it's clear a man is missing and the position needs to be filled. Eventually, Mrs. Principal calls Karen again to ask her how she is and when she will be back. When Karen says she can't handle the pressure and wants to quit, Mrs. Principal is stunned by this. Karen is only in her first year. Quitting in the middle will risk her future, and finding another consultant in the middle of the school year is almost impossible. But she kept her thoughts to herself and just said she doesn't think it's necessary or wise just to feel better and come back. But Karen doesn't come back, and after 2 more weeks of absence, her husband calls in to ask why no money is paid. He gets the obvious answer. Karen has no right to paid sick leave. He gets angry and promises to check his options, which in lawyers' terms is I want to sue you. Now it's clear that the bridge was burned and Karen will not be back. Mrs. Principal started looking for a replacement, and the options aren't great. Eventually, she convinced a retired consultant to come back from retirement just to save this year. The replacement starts working, but can't get paid. The position is still officially occupied by Karen, who is still on sick leave. Board members are now calling Karen, as it's clear she will not talk to Mrs. Principal. They ask her to come back, and when she refuses, they ask her to submit her resignation to allow them to keep the school running. Karen claims she is ready to come back only if she will be paid for all her sick leave, but nobody's willing to pay that. The mess is growing bigger and bigger. The parents start to hear rumors, and the overall climate is not very good. Until finally Kevin, Karen's husband, calls in and says he wants to sue the school for the payment. He gets to talk to the city lawyers, who explain to him that Karen cannot sue the school or the city while she is still sick or still registered as an employee. She has to stop one of these conditions. The day after, Karen is at school with a standard resignation letter, stating her mental and health issues caused by the toxic environment as her reasons. Finally, after more than 2 months, the position is clear and filled right away. What was just rumors by now has become fact. Parents were aware that something went on. Finally, in a group chat of parents with Mrs. Principal, they ask her what was it all about. Mrs. Principal replies that Karen has resigned due to her mental issues. Kevin did try to sue the city. It went to mediation before court hearing. The mediator saw the material and strongly advised Kevin to withdraw. Kevin listened, and the whole thing was forgotten for a while. 3 months passed. School was doing okay when an email from Karen landed in Mrs. Principal inbox. In short, legal language, Karen informs Mrs. Principal that she knows she was slandering her in public. She has screenshots as evidence that she claimed she had mental issues, and that is all not true at all. Karen demanded Mrs. Principal to apologize in public and clarify that Karen did not have any mental issues, and her resignation was due to professional disputes. Mrs. Principal was shocked. She knew for a fact that Karen was, let's just say, not 100% okay up there, and she had a resignation letter to prove it. Going this way from Karen was beyond stupid. Mrs. Principal, however, did the right thing and sent the letter to the school board, asking them what they think should be done. School board just heard the words legal actions and freaked out. They didn't want any of this. They demanded Mrs. Principal to just apologize and let it all be gone. But Mrs. Principal was not willing to admit wrongdoing anything, as she knew she did everything right. The board kept his opinion, claiming Mrs. Principal is being pointlessly stubborn, and they will not cover any legal matters in that issue, which is against Mrs. Principal contract. All legal liability that she has within her work should be covered by her employer. That meant her job was on the line now, and Mrs. Principal was determined to fight back and win. But without the city resources, fighting a slander lawsuit is expensive, and with her job at risk, it will not be easy. Mrs. Principal went again to the parents' forum, let them know that she had some personal legal issues, and asked if they knew who could help. One of the parents, a lawyer, agreed to help without pay, noted it is highly unprofessional to ask parents to help in personal issues, but it wasn't really a personal issue. It was the school issue, and that lawyer's parents noted that after he was informed the details, the lawyer agreed Karen and Kevin had no grounds to sue, but said that if they sent the email, their intention is to sue anyway, and nothing Mrs. Principal would do will stop them. So it's better if Mrs. Principal just ignored it and let them dig their own grave. And digging they dug. A week after the first letter, a new letter arrived, by regular mail, in an envelope. It was printed on Kevin's law firm letter, stating that the matter should be resolved by public apology, or they will sue. Even the lawyer did not believe someone in a large prestige law firm is that dumb, but here the letter is to prove it. A trial will take time and will cost money, even if he is doing it for free, not to mention that Mrs. Principal would be fired no matter the result. They had to find another solution. The lawyer figured out that stupid people need stupid solutions. He thought about it for a while, and then remembered he had a classmate in college who went working for that firm. He called that classmate and asked him how he is, now that they are both well after their college years. Apparently, his classmate worked hard and got to become a junior partner in the firm. When the lawyer mentioned the case, his friend was surprised. He hadn't heard about this case, and he should have, as lawyers in large firms gossip like old women, and a slander suit against a special education school. It's the most raunchy gossip in town, but also a pure nightmare. He and other partners would never take a case like this. It will make them look like greedy lawyers who would skin off anybody for a penny, not good publicity. He promised to look around and check what is going on in the firm. It didn't take him long. The next day, he called the lawyer back. He found out no lawyer in the firm was aware of the case. He figured Kevin used the firm paper to send the letter, but no lawyer above him was involved. Good news for our lawyer. Together, they planned the right answer to Kevin and Karen, the answer that will shut them out for good. The lawyer called Mrs. Principal and told her his plan. It was easy, simple, and malicious. She didn't like it, but agreed to it as it was the best and fastest way to resolve the situation. Next thing, the lawyer drafted his settlement agreement. He called Kevin and asked him if it would work. The agreement stated that Mrs. Principal will apologize to Karen in the most public way she can and will post all the legally related papers alongside the apology in the school webpage. The agreement stated that the apology can come in any form, as long as it can be searched in Google search and has a link from the school webpage. It also stated that after the apology, Karen and Kevin will not be able to sue the school ever again, and will have no further demands from Mrs. Principal or the school ever again. The last clause stated that if any unrelated issues will come of this agreement, Karen and Kevin will be liable for any consequences, and the school can demand any losses it suffers from them. Kevin agreed to all the terms. Within 2 hours, Karen and Kevin signed the agreement, and the next stage was ready to launch. The lawyer came to Mrs. Principal's office with the equipment he needed and the apology transcript. He set a video camera and Mrs. Principal read her apology. She opened with an introduction who Mrs. Principal is, what she had done so far in her career, her degrees, and recommendation. She also made an introduction to Karen, her career so far, her degree and recommendation, none so far. And after the introduction, she explained that Karen claims she left the school in the middle of the school year because of professional disagreement. And any other comment Mrs. Principal or any other have claimed about Karen health and mental issues, if false, and Mrs. Principal is sorry if Karen or anybody else heard so, and if Karen's feelings were hurt. In essence, anyone who sees the video understands exactly who Karen is, and even if Mrs. Principal didn't say it in words, it was clear she thought very bad things about Karen. Right after it was finished, the video was uploaded to the school YouTube channel, and a subsite under the school website was created showing the video and all the related documents, including the threatening letter Kevin sent in his firm paper. A link was sent to Kevin with the short line. That settled the matter. Don't contact us ever again. Karen and Kevin have won the battle. A month passed, and Kevin suddenly got fired from his firm. Apparently, he wasn't in a position to send a letter-threatening lawsuit under the firm paper without any higher-up lawyer watching him. Sending it like that for a case he managed himself was plain fraud. He was reported to the bar, but to not let a scandal and PER disaster come out, he was just let go and no further punishment was taken. The firm sent a letter to the school admitting the fraud and asking the school to remove a threatening letter Kevin sent. The school graciously agreed and Kevin's letter was removed, but the firm letter admitting Kevin's fraud was published instead. Kevin was done in business. Any lawyer who came to look for a job asked him why he left the big firm before he even got past the first stage, and a simple search of his name showed he committed fraud against a special education school of all places. Nobody would hire him. Meanwhile, Karen kept looking for a job in her field. She had to wait until the new school year began. Her college professor was not willing to write her any recommendation, and she had to explain the missing year in her resume to any principal. Few school principals heard she worked with Mrs. Principal and called her to ask about Karen, which Mrs. Principal only said that due to legal issues she can't talk about Karen, and it is all explained in the legal section of the school website. That was enough. Any principal who knows Karen sued her former school will not dare to hire her. Karen lost that school year and to support herself began looking for other jobs. She found a job as a secretary in an office that didn't Google searched her name and worked there for a couple of months, until the manager got bored one day and decided to search Karen's name. She was fired the next day for a minor F-up. It has been more than 5 years since it happened. Kevin is a lawyer in a sleazy firm hired mostly by low-life criminals. He loses most of his court cases and is known as the low-life lawyer for the low-life criminal. Karen is still looking for a job. She can't hold a job for more than 6 months before she gets fired for petty things. They both know very well why they are doing so poorly in life. Kevin sent another threatening letter demanding to remove all mentions of his name and Karen's name from the school website. He also asked to remove the video. The lawyer just told him that it is what he agreed on, and if he wants to renegotiate, he will demand Kevin to pay for damages. He didn't specify what damages, and Kevin didn't ask. He gave up. Karen and Kevin admitted defeat. They lost the war. Mrs. Principal eventually removed the video from the school site and set it as private on YouTube. But all the legal letters are still posted there and will be there until, well, maybe forever. My tires are low on pressure, so I decided to head to the gas station to air them up. As I pull into the gas station, there is one parking spot specifically for people airing up their tires. It's one parking spot with crosswalk-style paint on both sides, so you can have room to air up your tires. As I pull up to the compressor, there is a brand new Range Rover in the parking spot. I know he's not airing up his tires because those tires use nitrogen and even have the little 2-valve stem caps. Anyway, you never know what the story is, so I'm being reasonable about it. I waited a few minutes and the owner never returned to his car, so I went in the store. I politely asked the cashier, "Do you know who's driving the Range Rover out there?" As I point out the window, the Range Rover owner heard me and says, "What is the problem?" And I said, super politely, "Hey, I have to air up my tires. Would you mind moving your car so I can use the compressor?" "No rush, though. I can wait until you're done," he replies. "Let me finish my purchase." The way he said it was kind of dickish. He has a straight look on his face the entire time. I head outside and wait for him by my truck. He finishes his purchase and heads out front where he runs into two of his friends. They all three start chatting, and the guy doesn't seem to care about moving a car with any urgency. After a couple of minutes, I found this to be kind of rude, so I walk somewhat close to them and say, "Hey, sorry. Can you move your car real quick?" He doesn't even look at me. He maintains eye contact with his friends and gives me the hand motion of shoo or go away. Pissed me off. I was triggered. I jump in my truck and pull it into the crosswalk, painted portion where you air your tires. I turn on the compressor and pull the hose right over the hood of his Range Rover so it can reach my tires. He goes, hey, watch it. And I respond, super triggered, then move your car. He replies, I'll move my car when I feel like it, and then goes back to chatting with his two friends. As I'm airing up my tires, they wander to the side of the store surveying a lot for sale next to the gas station. As I got in between my truck and his Range Rover to air my passenger side tires, I deflated his driver's side tires in parallel. They aren't flat, but low enough where he will definitely be prompted with a low tire pressure message. I got in my truck and drove off, all while he was still talking with his buddies. I didn't get to see his reaction, but I'm sure everything will click as soon as he starts the engine and sees the message on his dash. And that's a wrap on today's episode at K-Korner. I hope these stories left you amazed, inspired, or maybe even a little more knowledgeable about the quirky side of life. Remember, life is full of surprises, and who knows, maybe one day your story will be featured here. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next video.